The main aspect to improving at pickleball is always going to be how much you practice and how long you've been playing for. But in this video, I'm going to take you through 5 things that will help you get better pretty much immediately. So let's get into it. Helping me today, I have my sister Kennedy. The first thing I want to take you guys through is something that if you play tennis is a very obvious truth, but if you've never played tennis, you might have never even thought about this when playing pickleball. And it's that when you hit the ball, you want to try to be exhaling. So when I'm hitting the ball, I want to be breathing outward as I'm moving my racket, my paddle towards the ball, okay? So what that sounds like is this. And in tennis, what happens is a lot of players actually grunt, and you don't need to grunt to get the effect of exhaling, but when you exhale, what happens is it makes your body looser. So why you want to be loose when you hit the ball is because it gives you a more fluid motion. So if I'm holding my breath as I'm hitting the shot, it makes my stroke a lot more rigid, which actually reduces my control and my accuracy. So a lot of players think that if they're tighter and they grip their paddle tighter, it gives them more control, but that's not the case. Especially from the back of the court, you want to be as loose as you can when you're hitting either a drive or a drop because it makes you more accurate and it makes you more consistent. So how do you time this? So when I hit a ball to the other side of the court, as it's coming to me, I usually inhale right as it's about to get to me, and I don't do it as loud as I just did there. But as the ball is coming toward me, I do a slight inhale. Then as I start to accelerate forward, I exhale. So let me show you a few examples of that. I'll be a little bit exaggerated. And it doesn't need to be a super extreme exhale. The main thing is you want consistency with your timing of it. So if you're inhaling on one shot, then exhaling on the next, it's going to make your stroke inconsistent. You want to be breathing the same way when you hit the ball, and that makes you the most consistent. So to show you a few more. So as you can see, I time it in a way where I can always exhale when I'm hitting the shot, and that makes me loose and it makes me play better. So this is something that it takes a little bit of practice to get the rhythm for it, but when you get it down, you will immediately play better. There's a reason that all the best players do this, all the best tennis players do this, and they do this in other sports too. It's not just racket sports. It helps a lot to be exhaling as you're going through your motion. The next thing that you can do to immediately play better is focus on 2 tactics that force your opponents to hit more balls when they're trying to end the point. And they're called guessing and retreating. So what are they? Guessing is where when I'm at the back of the court, a lot of the time I might give my opponent a super easy shot that they can smash, and their goal there is obviously to hit it in a way to where you can't get the ball back. So if I hit Kennedy a lob, her 2 options are out wide and down the middle if she's going to hit to my side of the court. So if she goes out wide, it'll look something like that, right? And if I'm to stand in this position, when I see that lob going to her, I'm probably not going to be able to get there in time. So what I can do is if I give my opponent a super easy shot that they're going to be able to end the point with, I can actually guess where they're going to hit it in order to try to make them hit another ball. So in that same situation, if I hit Kennedy a lob and I think she's going to go for an angle, I can move there a little bit early and try to reflex a drop like I did there. So based on where you hit them the shot, you can actually make an educated guess too on where you think they're going to hit the ball. So because Kennedy is at an angle from me, she has a really good opportunity to take the ball out wide. So if I hit her the lob here, I might take that into account and start shifting towards that angle a little bit early, which gives me that head start that I need to get the ball back. And you can do the same thing if you think they're going to go down the middle too. You just have to see where they are on the court and kind of assess what their best options are. And if you do this, you're going to get yourself in a lot more points than you would otherwise. So if you feel like your opponent is going to end the point and you're not going to be able to get the shot back, you're always better off at least shifting a little bit towards the direction where you think they're going to hit the ball. So the next part of making your opponent hit another ball, the next tactic is called retreating. You may have seen players do this. This is essentially where if I'm up and I hit my opponent a high shot, I'm better off backing up sometimes to give myself more time to react. So if you just give them a little bit of a high ball, you don't have to retreat. But if I give Kennedy a high ball like this, I definitely want to back up to react better. So if I'm standing up when she has an overhead, there's almost 0 chance that I have enough time to react quickly enough to get the ball back. But if I see that the ball is going high and she's going to attack, I might as well at least take a quick step back because that can give me the time that I need to make the ball in. So just know, if you're up, A lot of people say you should never back up in pickleball. This is not true. If you give your opponents a super high ball and you're up, you're always better taking at least one step back, if not multiple steps back if you have more time. So to show you a few examples of that, for dinking, you give Kennedy a higher ball. There, I took one step back. Let's say to here though, we're dinking. I go for a lob, it's bad. There, I take multiple. Then I'm actually at the back of the court, trying to recover from that. And then when I do, I can move back in like I just did there. Moral of the story is when you're on defense and you get yourself into a bad situation, you want to do what you can to make your opponents have to work as hard as they possibly can to win the point. Never go down without a fight, and you'll win more games immediately. And guys, if you like these tips so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel by hitting the subscribe button below the video. Every week we release new tips just like this. So if you want to constantly be learning new pickleball tips and getting better at the sport, then make sure to subscribe because you'll be suggested in our future videos, which we release almost every week. While you're down there, make sure to hit the thumbs up button too. The next tip that I have, and probably the best hack on this list if you want to get the fastest possible results, is what I call positioning yourself for more consistency. And there's three main spots that you need to think about this. The first is after your serve on your third shot. So after your third shot, my rule of thumb is that you almost never want to hit your third shot on the rise. So what does that mean? So when I hit my serve, the third shot's coming. So there, that would be an example of hitting my third shot on the rise. So when a ball bounces, it rises, and it falls, right? And you're almost always better off on a third shot hitting the ball either at its peak, so the highest point of the bounce, or as it's falling. And the reason for that is because when it's falling and when it's at its peak, you have more control just because it's easier to hit the ball when it's not coming right off of the bounce. It's easier to time it and you have more control over the ball. So what does that mean? So when I hit my serve, if my opponent hits to me a really deep return like Kennedy just did, sometimes I actually need to back up so that I could let it fall a little bit. But if you're being lazy with your feet, what might happen is you might be standing right where you hit the serve, which is usually right behind the baseline. And if she hits a deep return, well, I might just end up taking it on the rise because I don't move. So what you need to think about is that when your opponent hits the return, watch where the ball is going and assess if you need to get back up really quickly. And by doing this and making sure you're always hitting the return when it's falling or at its peak, you're just going to have a better third shot every single time. So it's a really simple way to play better and win more games. The next part of positioning yourself for more consistency has to do with your return. And it's that if your opponent is hitting really hard, deep serves, what you don't want to do is this. So as you can see, she hit a really hard serve. I took it super low on the rise. And what that does is it makes it really hard for me to stay consistent with it. Because if you're hitting the ball too close to where it's bouncing, it's very erratic where it's going to go. You don't have much time to assess where it goes after the bounce. This could cause you to miss the center of your paddle, which can cause a miss hit with any paddle, okay? So my rule of thumb is that on your return in pickleball, you want to position yourself so that you can return and hit the ball from around your waist height. If you're hitting it below your waist height, that means you're probably standing too close. So depending on who you're playing, if they're serving really hard, you might want to back up a little bit. So if Kennedy's serving really hard and I notice, wow, Kennedy has a very hard serve, what I'm gonna do is the next time I'm playing a point against her and she's serving, I'm gonna stand maybe 3 feet behind the baseline. And by standing here, I almost guarantee that the ball is going to bounce up more and I'm gonna get it closer to my waist height. So it's really a person by person thing. If your opponents are serving slow, you actually don't need to back up and you shouldn't back up. Assess if they're serving hard, and if they are, give yourself that extra room so that you have enough space to see the ball rise off the bounce. This will make your return way more consistent. The last part of positioning yourself for more consistency is just that you shouldn't be lazy with your feet ever. If you're getting lazy with your feet, you're going to be less consistent, you're going to win less points. While pickleball is not the most physical sport, the more physical you are with your feet, the more you're going to win. So if I'm playing points where I'm on my heels and I don't have a wide base, it's going to be really easy for Kennedy to wrong foot me and to get me in a position where I'm off balance. So some rules of thumb: whenever you're playing a point, regardless of where you are on the court, you always want to have a wide base, bent knees, and you want to be on your toes. So what that looks like is like this. And in this position, I'm as active as I can, and I'm using the right footwork for each part of the court. So when I'm back, what that means is I take small adjustment steps to get in position, and as I start to move up, I take bigger lunging steps so that I'm on balance when I'm dinking and hitting resets. The moral of the story is think about your footwork and try as hard as you possibly can to be active. Don't be reactive, be proactive. So don't react to their shots. You want to be ready for them in advance so that you stay on balance like this. So the next thing you can do to play better pretty much immediately is modify your paddle. And there are 3 main ways that you can do this, and they're very effective. And the first has to do with your grip. So this is what we call the grip of the paddle, or the handle. And as you can see, I have a purple grip on here. This is the grip that the paddle comes with. It's called the replacement grip. Every paddle comes with one. And after a few days of using the replacement grip, it gets slippery. So if your grip looks like the one in this picture, it's probably time to add on what we call an overgrip. And what an overgrip does is it adds more tack so that your hand doesn't slip on the paddle. They're really easy, they're cheap, they're very easy to put on. Get an overgrip if your paddle is getting slippery, and if you do, you're gonna play better because you won't have to squeeze the paddle as tight in order to keep it steady in your hand. So overgrips are mandatory if you want to be playing at the highest level. They're very easy to use. Highly recommend trying an overgrip, and you'll probably play better immediately. The next thing that you can do to your paddle is what we call weighting the perimeter. So as you can see here, I have little weights on the corners of my paddle. And what this does is it makes my paddle less likely to shake when I hit a ball off center. And when that happens, my sweet spot gets bigger. So the sweet spot of the paddle is the area that I want to hit in order for the ball to come off my paddle with a good reaction. I'm sure you felt a mishit, or when you missed a sweet spot, it feels like you don't get as much power. It feels like the paddle twists a little bit in your hand and the ball doesn't go where you want it to. So by adding weight to the sides of your paddle like I have here, you can immediately play better because your sweet spot gets bigger. The downside is that it makes it a little bit harder to maneuver your paddle, but overall, if you add a little weight, you'll probably like it and you'll probably play better. Probably 80% of people prefer to have some amount of weight on their paddle. So I highly recommend testing with what we have here. These are balance pods, this is our product, or you can get basic lead tape and align the size of your paddle with it. And the last thing is more obvious, but if you have a cheap paddle that's not very good, upgrading to a better one that's more expensive and has better materials and better manufacturing will make you play better immediately. So this is our brand new paddle. It's called the Banger. This is our first power paddle. So some paddles are better for control and some paddles are better for power. This is a thinner paddle. So what that means is it's a little bit poppier. So when you hit the ball against it, it's a little bit of a more higher pitched sound. And that generally gives you more pop, which means you don't have to swing as quick to get a good amount of power on the ball. So if I'm in a hands battle, it becomes a little bit easier for me to get power without having to take a big swing. So there's downsides to having a power paddle, but the upside is when you're in a hands battle, you have a ton of pop and it's super easy for you to generate pace without having to put much on the ball. It's also a better paddle for getting power on your drives and your serves. So in 2025, power is becoming more important in pickleball. It used to be more about touch, dinks, and drops. 2025 is gonna be more about power because paddles are just getting more powerful. So if you want to enter the era of power with a better paddle, highly recommend checking out the Banger. It's just launched on our site and it's in stock now. The last thing that you can do to play better when you play pickleball immediately, it doesn't require much practice to do this properly, is when you attack your opponents with a harder shot, what you don't want to do is you don't want to give it away with a big backswing. So we call this disguising your attacks. We call this deception. So when I'm going to go for a speed up at the kitchen, I want it to look more like this. So as you see there, I didn't take a big backswing. What I did was I prepared for my speed up like I was about to dink it. Then at the last second, I flicked the ball right at her. So let me show you how that looks again. She's dinking with me, and then I flick. So I don't want the big backswing. I want to mimic what my dink looks like. Then at the last second, I use my wrist to accelerate so that she has less time to react to my hard shot. And from the back, you can do this too. If you're gonna hit a drive, don't make it super obvious at first. Prepare the same way you would on a drop, then take your bigger backswing and go for the powerful shot. So on a drive, you definitely need to go for a little bit bigger backswing, but you can at least set up in the beginning like you're gonna hit a drop, and that will make your opponent a little less likely to detect that you're gonna go for a drive, and it might make them hesitate more and not react as fast. And guys, if you want to learn the new rules that the USAPA released for 2025 that are effective January 1st, you kind of need to know them. Watch this.